The Sisters is the 12th episode of the second season of The Golden Girls. This is directed by Terry Hughes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I talk about what happens in this episode. Generally, it's a brilliant episode. It did start to slow down a little bit towards the end. I wasn't really sure where it was going, but then it picked up again. It starts off with Sophia sitting alone in the dark. Dorothy comes in and we find out that she's sighing because it's her birthday, Sophia's birthday, coming up soon. And Dorothy has got a surprise for her. And she refuses to tell Sophia what it is. And she goes into the kitchen and Blanche already knows what it is. And Rose desperately wants to know, but apparently Rose is a blabbermouth. And Dorothy eventually does tell her because she needs her help with organising it. And the surprise is that Dorothy has arranged for Sophia's sister Angela to come over. She moved back to Sicily 30 years ago or over 30 years ago and she hasn't seen her since. How exciting. Sophia spends quite a chunk of the episode trying to get it out of Rose. We have a lot of tricks that she tries to play on Rose. And honestly, I was on edge. I kept feeling like Rose was going to slip up because Sophia was really trying really hard. And she was trying to turn Dorothy against Rose so that Rose would no longer listen to what Dorothy wanted and listen to what Sophia wanted instead. And we have this wonderful moment where Dorothy comes into the kitchen where Sophia and Rose are. And obviously Sophia has not been privy to the conversation, and all Rose says is, "You can take your mop and put it where the herring don't swim." And she storms off. And on the one hand, that's out of context for Dorothy. She has no idea what that means. But at the same time, she's probably used to that from Rose. But I found it to be very funny. And they manage to get Sophia out, and then arrives Angela. And as soon as I saw her, I was very impressed, very, very impressed with the casting. She's played by Nancy Walker, and she doesn't look identical to Sophia, but I still think they did an amazing job with the casting, very impressive. We then have the party, and Dorothy gives in. She's just going to give Sophia her present now because she keeps hounding her. So Dorothy calls for the present to come through from the kitchen, and of course, it's Angela. And I was desperate to see Sophia's response. I couldn't wait to see how she would react. That's not what I was expecting. She said she hated her and she fled the room. And we then get a bit of a dull story from Blanche, to be perfectly honest. Didn't find it that interesting. But then Blanche, Dorothy and Rose realise they have to find out what happened between Angela and Sophia to make them hate each other. And Rose said something that I thought was pretty great. She said, and I quote, "People stay angry out of habit." Never really thought of that before, but that's so true. And I love that. I think that's one of several brilliant takeaways from this episode. Dorothy goes to Angela, Blanche and Rose go to Sophia, and we hear from Angela first. And honestly, Angela sounded like she was in the wrong. It did sound like Angela had jumped to conclusions without Sophia giving her a chance to explain. But then when we hear from Sophia, kind of the same thing. It seems like she jumped to conclusions as well. To make a very long story short, at a Christmas party in the 1950s, Angela thought Sophia kissed her husband and Sophia thought Angela had told people things about her that weren't true. It's a little bit more complicated than that with a lot of misunderstandings. And we do eventually, in the scene afterwards, in the final scene, we do get the truth coming out. Because Dorothy is about to take Angela to the airport and Sophia and Angela both explain what happened in front of each other. So that's the first time where they're both hearing the opposite person's side of the story and they both realise that they were both wrong. And the main thing is that Sophia wasn't wearing her shawl. She'd given her shawl to somebody else for the party. So the person that Angela saw wasn't actually Sophia. It was a simple misunderstanding. Fair enough, you see somebody with your sister's shawl, you can assume it's her, but the point there is that you should talk things out. Don't just run away from the problem. Don't just run away from each other, because until you get the full story, there's no point in making drastic decisions, because we can all be wrong at some point. We can all perceive a situation incorrectly. And this is the biggest takeaway from the episode. Well, actually, the biggest takeaway is that by being stubborn and not willing to speak with the other person, you might miss out on decades of an important relationship. And it's actually kind of emotional. I got a little bit emotional at the end. It is quite a beautiful ending. We end with Dorothy saying they should both be committed, which was pretty funny. But at the same time, the sisters make up, and I kind of had this thought that because of a simple misunderstanding on both their parts, it's not just one of them, they both misunderstood and they both didn't give the other person a chance to explain. But because of that, they missed out on 30-something years of that strong sisterly bond, and that's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking to think about. So definitely a really, really big takeaway there. And with Rose saying people stay angry out of habit as well, I feel like it's very easy to be annoyed at somebody and then never talk to them again. Even if you have a valid reason for being annoyed at them, over time that anger might subside. But because you're used to feeling angry, you just assume you still feel angry. So unless you take the time to actually think, hang on, am I still angry? Or am I just used to feeling this way? You might just be stuck in a rut. And I thought that was a pretty beautiful takeaway as well. Also, Rose saying that she talks to the pigs on her shower curtain was also a lovely takeaway. Some really great comedic moments here. Fantastic casting with Nancy Walker as Angela. And some really important messages as well. And I think a lot of people can really benefit from a lot of the aspects of this episode. And even if you can't, it's still really enjoyable. The Sisters is definitely a really great Golden Girls episode.